Welcome to the second day of the CXO 2.0 conference, brought to you by the generous support of our platinum sponsor, the Michael Koch Group. We're set for another vibrant day, discovering leading-edge practices in business strategy and leadership mastery. Before we dive into today's sessions, filled with knowledge sharing and connection building, make sure to engage with us and your peers on social media platforms. You can do so by using the hashtag CXO, the number 2, and CONF for conference. By sharing what you learned, it's a channel to broadcast your thoughts and all of your takeaways with a global audience. So make sure you're sharing on your tweets, stories, posts, all that good stuff. Also, another special thanks to our gold and bronze sponsors, Total Max Homes and Redapt. To kick off our first session, we're diving into an exciting topic, building a culture of sustainability, how to engage employees and stakeholders. In this panel discussion, we'll explore forward-thinking strategies for integrating sustainability deeply into our practices, ensuring everyone involved is part of our journey. Please welcome our moderator, Jeffrey Cecil, CEO of Pull the Chute, and our panelists to the stage. Let's give them a round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. I hope we're all doing well. I hope we didn't stay out too late. We have a sparse crowd, so hopefully others will start joining. It's Vegas anyway, right? So people kind of go a little bit longer than they should, I am sure. Although I don't know about you guys, but I actually ate at Helsinki last night.
Wow,
that was
great.
Really cool to do. You watch the show all the time, right? But to actually go there and eat was really a lot of fun. So, my name is Jeff Cecil, as she said. I'm the moderator today. We're excited to be here. I'm excited about the panel. To get things started, I'm just going to ask them to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what your company or what you do in your company as well. So,
excellent. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rodney Tolson, and my company is Restorative Consulting Services, LLC. What I do restorative practices, coaching, training, and implementation all over the United States. So restorative practices involves going into school districts and helping them build great restorative communities.
Great, thanks, Rodney. Good morning, everybody. My name is Wei Li Chong. Just by way of quick background, I look at my career in 3 chapters. Chapter 1, I was a human resources professional and did human resources for a lot of retail multi-unit businesses. At the end of that, I had the opportunity to become the CHRO for a company called KinderCare, largest child care provider, about 1,500 locations, 30,000 employees. The company was on 14 quarters of decline. We didn't know it at the time, but bottom quartile employee and family engagement. Shocking. People left their children and they hated us. I took that opportunity for one reason. The CEO said, there's so many things we can do operationally, but if we can't get the culture on the right track, nothing is going to matter. And the company was about 6 months from bankruptcy. We took it on 25 quarters of growth, and I started Chapter 2, the private equity company that bought us. We put about $1 billion of value in the company in 3 years, and moved engagement from employees and families from the bottom quartile to the top. They said, it's pretty clear your people strategy is your business strategy. We'd love Wei Li to run the P&L. So that was Chapter 2, running businesses with an eye on how to drive sustainable growth through a focus around people. Did that for a number of years, and then I started my own business called Culture Playbook Partners. The focus is really helping businesses modernize their processes to really think through how to drive results through people. So it's great to be here.
Thanks, Willie. That was great. So, good morning, and thanks for having us and enjoying this next hour together. We could make it 2 or 3, probably.
Yeah, let's do that.
I'm Tom Heemster, Dr. Tom, and I started my own business, Mach 5. But before that, I was an F-16 fighter pilot, eventually F-16 fighter squadron commander. So, $20 million a copy for those airplanes, and the government invests about $10 million a piece in each of those pilots. So a lot of assets and resources there, in the government to back us there. So that was nice. Thank you for paying your taxes. So anyway, 15 combat missions, and loved the F-16. The cool thing there is my when I started my business, Mach 5, like I told you, it's all about dreams, right? We all have those dreams. Some as adults, we forget we had those dreams because we never really pursued them. We got busy with business and working and all that kind of stuff. So I like to help people achieve their dreams, or really their maximum potential. That's what Mach 5 is all about. So when I was 10 years old, I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and that dream came true. So Mach 5, my focus with my PhD is on servant leadership and transformational leadership. And so we're way strong into those aspects and bringing those things to business and help them with transformational change. So that was my focus in my PhD. And so I'd like to continue the conversation on the road here. But one of the cool things on your table, I put a little handout there. It's a book that's coming out in a few months. It's called The Hypersonic Secret, and it's about quantum leadership. So everybody's heard about servant leadership or transformational leadership, but the next is quantum leadership. And so it's a whole new way of thinking, and it's a whole new way of thinking about how we think. So I'm excited, fired up about that and bringing it to you here in a few minutes. And you'll notice that Kevin Harrington, one of the original Shark Tanks, is partnering with us to get that out to you. So
very cool.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, you know, just to let you know, I got to commend you because I did a ride along on a Hornet.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God, that is, if you ever get a chance to do a ride along, I got so, I'm blown away. It's an experience.
And how many
I
barf
get so
bags?
sick.
How many what?
How many barf bags?
I'm not going to say.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely they took me for a they took me for a ride. I had friends in the Air Force, and so they got me a ride along, and
cool.
It was an experience. But yeah, I thank you for your service too.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my name is Jeffrey Weiss, and I run a company called the Preparedness Network. I have my background, to give you a background, I've been a broadcast engineer for 30 years. I built hundreds of TV stations, production companies, post-production companies. I built a company that has been one of the model broadcast engineering systems integration companies in the United States, defining the standards for broadcasting. But all my life, I've had a passion for volunteering. When I was 10 years old, a good friend of mine passed away. He was killed by a drunk driver. And in my sorrow, I went to my grandmother's, and she took me to Baltimore. And among the things that we saw, we went to the National Portrait Gallery, and there was an exhibit honoring the Roosevelts. And I was standing in front of a statue of Eleanor Roosevelt, and my grandmother whispered her words to me. When you cease to make a contribution, you begin to die. When you cease to make a contribution, you begin to die. Those words echoed for me. And all my life, everything I do has to make a contribution. So, I went through life. I didn't even have a high school diploma, but I became a broadcast engineer. And I decided several years ago that I was going to reinvent myself. And I went to MIT. I just graduated from MIT in global sustainability. And I started a company called the Preparedness Network. There's a flyer on the tables for the Preparedness Network. At the Preparedness Network, we do 3 basic things. We help companies prepare for disasters, whether it's fires, floods, earthquakes, active shooter instances, whatever your disaster is. If you're not preparing for one, you're reacting to one. And we go to companies between 25 and 300 employees are our key market, and we work with HR people, and we help the whole company develop plans for that. And our active shooter program is very popular. We actually have a free active shooter training program. So if you sign up, if you're here, you can contact us, and we will give you a free active shooter training program for your company, totally free, everything. And then, so besides our disaster preparedness training, we also do teach companies how to create a volunteer corporate structure of volunteering. If you're a company, the 3 most important things are retaining your employees, attracting the best employees to work for your company, and building your brand. And nothing does that like volunteering as a company. And we teach you, we have a 4-pillar system. I'm happy to go through that with you at another time and teach you how that works. And it's all a powerful thing. And all of our training is done through leadership. Everything rises and falls with leadership. I'm a John Maxwell leadership coach, Dale Carnegie leadership coach, worked with Tony Robbins and Dee Grazioso and a bunch of people. Brian Tracy I've worked with in the past. So I come from a long line of coaching and kind of like that. So we really surround all of our training through leadership, and that's what we bring to that.
Great.
So I'm happy to discuss that with you, and I thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that so much. And as I said, my name is Jeff Cecil. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Pull the Shoot. And Pull the Shoot is all about, the tagline is grow your people, grow your company, because we're a firm believer that if you take care of your people, they'll take care of you. And the reason it's called Pull the Shoot had to do with a skydiving event that I did when I turned 40. You know, statistically, our life is half over, according to the stats, at 40. So I decided to go skydiving, and you know, you jump out of a plane and you're falling at 120 miles an hour, and it's hard to breathe, and one little move of your hand, you spin out of control, and everything's happening so fast, you can't see where you're at, you can't see where you're going. But when you pull the chute, suddenly you can breathe again, you're in control, you can see where you're at, and you can see where you want to go. And isn't that a lot like being in business today? And that's why I named it that. So our goal is to get people to, quote unquote, pull the chute and get them to just work and focus on their business. We meet with them every week, and our goal is to help 200 companies grow and be the best they can be by 2030. And so we're excited to do that. So, but being a business coach is just more of a passion for me, much like everybody else up here. You know, we've all kind of gone through our lives, and at some point we're like, this is what I want to start doing. So I think that's great. So, you know, the name of this panel is called Building a Culture of Sustainability, How to Engage Employees and Stakeholders. And so to kind of kick us off here, what I wanted to do was kind of talk about how leadership has changed in recent years especially, but since, you know, like when I was in corporate America, I'm originally from Chicago, I worked at Harris Bank, and, you know, Harris Bank was one of those areas where in the 80s, you went there, you did your job, you put your head down, you went home and you got a paycheck. You don't ask, you know, they didn't ask you for advice, they didn't ask your opinion, they knew everything and you just did it the way they wanted you to do it. Which really was no fun because I never was able to grow into a leadership type thing. I happened to have a boss that was really bucking that whole system. A woman became my mentor because she was all about encouraging us and getting us to do better. But I think that has all changed. And you know, one of the issues that you ran into back there was turnover, right? Because people weren't being appreciated. They didn't know what they fit in. And so how did they, you know, grow? They just weren't. So today I want to talk a little bit about, as we get things going with you guys, and the first thing I want to do is talk about what is sustainability to you? So, because I mean, that's an interesting word in my opinion. I have my own thoughts, but Rodney, we're going to start with you. What is sustainability for you?
All right, thanks, Jeff. Well, when you think about sustainability, a process of something that can continue over time. Mm-hmm. So when we look at the workplace, my business is in education, so I'm coaching principals and district leaders. What is the process in your school, in your building, in your district offices that can be created and sustained over time? However, the main caveat is it has to be a process that people want to continue over time, because the whole thing of sustainability is that it should go on after I leave. And so to me, we have to first create something that people will want to carry on, and then build those processes of capacity, how that is going to be accomplished.
Cool, love it, love it.
Yeah, I agree, Rodney. I think it's maintaining the same rate over time. You can call it business performance. I think when you talk about culture, the difficult thing is culture is really defined on your worst day. So when companies are struggling, you really start to understand what they really care about, and they'll do things to survive. So when I think about building a culture of sustainability, it's, are you able to make the right decisions for employees and the business when times are the most difficult? And that is a key part of building, maintaining rate over time.
Cool. John?
Yeah, I think, like Rodney said, it's a process, right? So those processes, hopefully as a coach and consultant, like we do for Mach 5, we leave those processes with them. But also the coaching to make it sustainable. So one of the ways is really help them understand transformational leadership, right? And it's with timeless principles. If it's timeless principles that you're focused on, it's going to last. You're going to leave something with them that they can continue that process. So with transformational leadership, that term gets abused like crazy now. I mean, we think we have transformational bridges and transformational budgets and transformational Buddha judges. And, you know, they just misuse that term. So I've redefined it in my focus on my PhD there, and it's, I tell you the rest of the story.
Paul Harvey, huh?
That's right, Paul Harvey, the rest of the story. So the R is relationships. Now, if we continued to have sustainable relationships and focused on it, I mean, wouldn't that change Chicago or San Francisco or Washington, D.C.? So the R is relationships, and the E is experiential learning. So these are all types of learning. We got a lot to learn on relationships. We got a lot to learn on experiential learning. And people are starting to get that experiences stay with you. So definitely a key. And then the S is service learning. Are there any veterans in the crowd?
Cool.
Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, so you guys understand service for sure, right? And lots of businesses out there do as well. But when you see that young troop that gets his leg blown off and he's in the hospital and the reporter asks him, well, what are you going to do next? He said, I'm going back on the front lines. Why? Why? Such sacrifice, right? And so they understand service and servant leadership, right? So the S is service learning, right? And a lot of schools are starting to adopt that and have service learning projects. Great. That's going to help them sustain what the good that they want in that company. And the last one is truth learning. And we kind of suck at that too, you know? Everybody says, this is my truth. Well, that's your truth. There's no such thing. If it's your truth, it's an opinion. It's not truth. I know what they're trying to say, but there is truth with a capital T, and that's absolute truth. And if we use those timeless principles to pass on that truth, we can make sustainable organizations.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that.
Very good. So, sustainability to me is really a multifaceted thing. It really means, how we relate to each other, how we relate to our environment, how we relate to what we do in building. In our hiring practices, do we hire sustainability? Do we hire with sustainability? Do we maintain our employee structures? What products do we use when we manufacture? So thinking about small to mid-range companies think locally, and they really got to think. You really got to think globally. It's hard to really. People don't really pay attention to the G6 summit that comes on. They say, just on the news and this and that. But there's a lot of things they do, and what affects people in India affects people in LA. The butterfly effect is a true concept, and so you've got to understand where we are, how we're running our business. So when you're running a business, do you run it in a sustainable manner? Do you recycle? Do you choose the products that you do? Do you maybe say, hey, I'm going to go away from a paper-based business and go to a digital-based business? Am I going to, instead of having a lot of, I love to sell on-premise storage, but maybe I need to move some of my stuff in the cloud so I'm more economical and more sustainable. So thinking about what you do, what your kids do, how we live our lives. Sustainability is something that connects us all. It's kind of like an avatar with the plants and the creatures all are connected. That is truly sustainability is that. So, what sustainability means to me is who we are, understanding the core of who we are, and how we relate to our country, our planet, and beyond.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that.
By the way, I was going to say, on parachute, I did the Normandy jump 10 years ago.
No way.
Yes, I did.
Oh, fun for you. Yeah. Fun for you. So for me, sustainability, really, I'm going to follow Wei Li's comment, is about resilience. I'll use a different word, but it's all about resilience, right? When you go through difficult times, and every business does one time or another, how resilient are you? Because together, when you go through those difficult times, and you come out of it, that's really what's going to help them grow and build sustainability for the future, because they know that they made it through one issue, that they're going to make it through the next one, and they're going to count on each other. So it's not always a bad thing when something bad happens to your business. It's how you handle it, how you come out of it, how resilient you are when you do it. I think that's an important thing. So thanks, guys. And so we're going to jump now. I want to really talk about leadership as a whole, and we live in this time where the whole landscape is changing, and I think it's a difficult time, and we have to be open to change with things. So kind of having said that, what do you think are the key challenges of leadership today? And Wei Li, I'm going to start with you. Rodney, we'll come back. Okay.
Yeah, I think the key challenge right now is culture. You talk about transformation. Culture is the same thing. It's becoming this abstract concept that a lot of people like to talk about intellectually, but they don't understand the practical impact it has on business. And I think that's a key challenge because, as an example, I was at a CFO forum in New York City, and it was about 100 CFOs, and the topic was culture. And one of the CFOs stood up and said, for the last 20 years, I was taught to stay away from human resources. And the panel moderator says, well, why? And they said, well, they just spend money on programs. There's no return on investment. And the whole concept was, he said, I know there's some impact, but I don't quite get it. So I think a big challenge is, and one of the things that we start with in every organization is we quantify, we try to make it very tangible. We know the research today with so many dynamics, 2/3 of the US workforce and more globally are not connected to what they do. They're just not engaged. Right? A third of the workforce comes to work every day really leaning in and going above and beyond. Well, the statistics show 2 of those people are working against you, are working against the company. 5 of them are just sitting on the fence. Right? Marketers had a dream in COVID. They called them quiet quitters. I call them paycheck collectors. Right? They do the minimum amount just to get the paycheck, but they're not going to go above and beyond. You can quantify that. And that gets a CFO's attention. The moment you get the CFO's attention, you have a path to improve profitability. And that, to me, is the start of the challenge to really do the things that everybody's talking about, the impact culture.
Well, let me dig a little deeper on that topic, though. So how do you feel because we have people that stay home and work,
Yeah.
and then we have people that are at the office. So is there a different way to quantify those for them? I mean,
Yeah.
How do you go about that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we talked about it as a panel. There's 4 generations at work right now.
That's one of the questions coming up. Yeah,
right?
go ahead.
Frankly, the older generation part of me, and you shared your experience, I was told to come to work before your boss and leave after your boss. And you hear so many luminaries in business now talking about, I need to get people back to the office. That's much more about control than contribution. The modern workforce needs to establish conditions so you can expand the number of people that are committed to your purpose, right, and align them with really strong focus so they know what they need to do to contribute in a meaningful way. That, by the way, is a human behavior. If you can tap into the human behavior to impact contribution, it really doesn't matter where you are. Now, having said that, it's all different for every organization. I talk to college students that are like, oh my God, it's amazing. I graduated college, now I get to work in my pajamas at home. And I said, you are the first person that should be going to the office every day so that you can sit with executives and learn from them. So it's very different when you look at return to office, but it's not a one size fits all, and I would not confuse control for contribution.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I think it's, we've always talked, if they're just doing their job, like we stopped watching hours.
Yeah.
It was like, here's the project, you need it done by Friday. You get that done, I'm good. If you did it at 2 in the morning, I don't care. You got the job done, and that's what we need to do. So, Tom, what do you think are key challenges that they're going through today?
Well, I appreciate what Lee said about culture there, and the culture is critical. Leaders define culture, right? I mean, leaders also define reality, and I'll get to that in a sec. But so culture is all about connection, I think, right? And we have all this logos, right? All this thinking in our head that this is our formula and this is how things work. But that's not really connection, just because you get knowledge. In fact, I saw it at the networking event last night here that you can tell the people who really get it and want to connect with you, and whereas they want to just spew their knowledge, right? And the knowledge just makes you arrogant. It doesn't make you connect, and so you have to connect beyond the head level there, the logos, to the heart level, right? And that's the pathos and the ethos, and of course there's chronos and kairos also, but connecting at the heart level, and that's how you establish culture. So I talked about the book there, Quantum Leadership. So put those 2 together, quantum science, quantum physics, all that stuff. Nobody's really applied that to the social sciences. So that's why I'm so excited about this book, because there's lessons from the quantum world, right? Like one of the principles is interconnectedness, right? And so there's interconnectedness that happens in those connections that develop culture. So if we understand that and apply those scientific principles that are in our head to our heart and behave according to those values that are consistent with our culture, now we're going to have an impact, and we're going to have the impact that we want to have.
All right, that's great. So in that vein then, from a challenge for the leaders, you think the challenge is, from what I'm hearing, is the challenge is getting them to create relationships with their employees?
Yes.
Is that kind of where you were heading with all that?
Yes, and not just connect at the knowledge level, and all this training, it's just knowledge, right? Connect at the heart level, which is values, or dreams, right? That dream made a difference in my life as a F-16 fighter pilot. Well, and it went deeper than that. After 15, 20 years of doing that, I realized It wasn't because I needed to be a fighter pilot, a warrior, you know. It was because I needed to be a warrior to protect other people's dreams. So we started this, I founded the Creators University to help teens achieve their creative dreams. And we help businesses with innovation and problem solving. So we teach creativity, but we do it from the heart.
That's great.
That's
Thanks.
great.
Appreciate that. Jeff?
So, everything is leadership. And as a leader, you should be defining and growing other leaders. If you're not growing other leaders, if you're not duplicating yourself, then you're not going anywhere. When Lee was talking, he mentioned that there was two different kinds of people: the people who go to work, and the people who we call them sharks and minnows. There's two kinds of people: sharks and minnows. If you in a corporate culture, if you're either a shark and you have to eat everybody else, or you don't want to make waves, so you become a minnow and you go off and you float around. But what it does is it creates an adversarial relationship in the business world, where I have to beat the other guy. I have to beat him, because if I want to get up if I want to promote myself up, I have to beat him. I have to knock him down. And if you're a minnow, then you're not important. But sharks go after other sharks mostly, but they do nibble on the minnows occasionally when it can benefit them. So what you need to do is to flip the culture upside down and create an environment where everybody is coming together. That's one reason why we promote, a volunteer culture in a company. If you have a company and you volunteer together and you have these different people working together for a common cause, to help somebody else, is to create a better environment, whether it's with the Red Cross, sound the alarm, or putting smoke detectors in people's homes, whether it's building houses with Habitat for Humanity, whatever it is, working at a church or synagogue, feeding people, whatever it is, when you come to work together, when you work together for this common cause, you gain a sense of self-worth and accomplishment. And by gaining that self-worth and accomplishment, you grow together, and you become less of an adversarial company and more as a congenial company working towards a common goal and growing together. And that dynamic can spread like wildfire and inspire people to become the better leaders, and inspire leaders to grow other leaders without worrying about, is that guy going to steal my job? So you need to grow yourself and grow other people, because that's the truth. Because otherwise, if you're not growing other leaders, you're just existing, and you're not going to survive. So that's me.
That's great. And what you described to me, anyway, was a culture of empathy.
Yeah.
Is really what Microsoft did that. When Gates and the other guys left, and Nadalia, I can't think it was.
Yeah.
Satya Nadella.
Yeah, thank you. When he came in, he changed that culture into a culture of empathy. And all of a sudden, instead of the sharks, because that was the one Gates built, right? He built the shark.
He built the Shark Tank.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But he flipped it, and Microsoft blossomed as a company.
Absolutely.
It's a great thing. So thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it. Brad?
All right, thanks, gentlemen. I want to expand on, Whaley, what you said about culture. And so when we're looking at it from a school standpoint, we define culture as the norms, values, and ideas that are collective in the school building, but also as culture is what you allow. And so from culture, you have to look at a standpoint of accountability. How is it good? And so you have culture, what we say, like we have a winning culture, but is that your actuality?
And what does that mean? Right?
What does that mean? And is it practiced?
Right.
And which leads to the climate of your workplace, which is how people are actually treated. Do they feel safe?
Right.
Do they have a voice? And so from a restorative standpoint, the challenge is getting leaders that want to have explicit practice, that practice fair process, that are social emotional with shame and affect. So those are some of the key challenges. And I'll go with what you said. Once you create a culture where people have a voice, and we talked about yesterday how in a restorative environment, 80% of interactions are proactive in relationship building. That creates the social capital and safety needed to do the 20%. And I'll share a quick story about Microsoft, how they actually were self-reflective. I worked for Microsoft.
Oh, wow.
And so Microsoft was having high turnover. And one of the things that they did, a lot of people don't notice, you'll get noticed now, they changed their exit interview question they used to ask people, why did you leave? You know, what made you leave?
Right.
What they did, they became self-reflective, and they start asking people, what did we not do to help you stay? And just looking inward created some of that restorative, some of that change, because now we're looking inwardly.
Right.
And so restorative leaders are always self-reflective, and they're always asking themselves, was that restorative?
Right.
And one more thing I'll say, one of the challenges of leaders is having people who can tell you when you're wrong. A great leader, you need someone that can say, hey, I disagree with that decision, because as leaders, we've been on a ledge,
right,
and you want to throw people off the roof, but you need someone to say, hey, wait a minute. Hey, Rodney, maybe maybe you're the person that's wrong. And so I always ask people as leaders, who is it in your building that can tell you when they think you're wrong without reprisal?
Cool. And so the three of us were actually having a conversation before this panel, and you used the word restorative and when we talked. So I'm going to ask you again, kind of explain what restorative is. Because when we talked, I didn't know what that meant. So the audience knows what that is.
I'll give them the fundamental hypothesis of restorative practice is that human beings are healthier, more likely to be cooperative and change their behavior when those in positions of authority do things with them rather than to them or for them.
Okay.
So a restorative leader does things with his employees rather than to them or for them.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate you doing that. And for me, I think one of the key challenges that leaders are going to have today is, first of all, they're not trained. What drives me absolutely crazy is when people get promoted into positions of leadership and then they're not taught how to be leaders. You know, the biggest one about that is, the top sales guy is killing it, making the sales, right? And they want to put him as the VP of sales. He's in charge of all the sales guys. And he has no clue how to be a leader. All he knew how to do was sell, which is a huge issue. There was a stat that came out from Forbes recently that 69% of the companies that, that have realize they have trouble with leadership, but yet they're not doing a whole lot about it. So I think that's one of the key challenges they do. And the other one is, if you're in a leadership role and you're feeling somewhat good about leadership role, delegating is another issue for a lot of people. They're not used to giving up the reins. They're like, I'm the leader, I should be doing this, and yet they don't have to. They can delegate things and then, carefully follow up, make sure things are getting done. And I always tell people, look, when you're delegating, they don't have to do it the exact same way you would have. As a matter of fact, you probably don't want them to do it the same way you would have, because they might find a better way to do it. And if you allow them to find a better way, they could save time, make it more efficient, or actually come up with better results. And so I think those are some key things that are important with our people in today's world. Any thoughts on that before I jump? Any other?
Yeah, go ahead. Just by a show of hands, I'm just curious. That statistic is great. 70%
right?
of leaders really struggle. If you think about your entire career, and you think about the managers you've had, people that you've worked for, raise your hand if across your career you think that most of your managers were poor versus good. Right? The majority. There's a majority. Now, to that statistic, Gallup has a research statistic that says 10% of people have the innate ability to lead.
Yeah,
right?
that's it.
We have a leadership issue. For the last 2 decades, 2/3 of the U.S. workforce have been less than engaged in their work. Like, that's the challenge. So we have to think about that, because we're in a room where, it's great to listen to panels yesterday. We're all drinking Kool-Aid around the importance of leadership and the impact. And we're a small cosmos trying to impact a population that either isn't innately wired to lead people naturally, or were recognized because they were great at doing something else and they found themselves in a leadership role. So there's a lot, obviously, the training that helps with that. Our position is where we found really great success and where I found a lot of success at KinderCare. It's the conditions that they work in that overcomplicate the work environment. So it's hard for them to move employees forward. So simplifying and really creating that connection, those things sit in the way that business processes are led. There's so much opportunity with it.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little different route. Dr. Thomas was not born a fighter pilot. You're never, nobody's born a leader. Some people have an innate, when they say innate ability to be a leader, they have in them the ability to go out and do that initial research and read. When I hire someone, the first question I ask them is, what are the last 2 books you've read? And if they tell me they don't read, and if they said I read comic books or this, I don't. If you say I read this on leadership or this on sales or this on, that's when I pay attention to them. No one's born a leader. All of you are leaders. Whether you're a mother leading your kids, whether you're a husband, helping your wife and leading this or leading, everybody has leadership within them. Everybody, but it's our responsibility to foster that leadership, to talk to new leaders, and leaders have responsibility to the other people to build those leaders and educate those leaders. So yes, you got that the top salesman who now being promoted into the sales manager. The company had taken time to say, hey, let's foster some leadership. Let's send him to a leadership conference. Let's get him these books on leadership. Let's give him, and all this stuff. But leaders are never born. Leaders are made. People are made into who they become. So if you're a company and you want to create leaders, then create leaders. And so no one's ever born who they are. People can grow up and be a fighter pilot. Yeah. Anybody can do it.
And he said it's a $10 million investment to make you a fighter pilot, right?
So you need to do that. No one ever jumps out of a plane without training, right? Yeah. I've done my share of jumps out of planes. You don't just say one morning, oh, we got a plane and jump out. No, you got to be trained to do that. Any skill, whether it's salesmanship, leadership, whatever it is, you need to be trained to do that. And it's your company's obligation to train leaders to become more powerful.
Absolutely. Ready?
Yes, I'd like to add to that. There's another component. Sometimes when we promote people, we aren't explicit about what they're getting themselves into.
That's right.
So another thing about creating leaders is letting me know what am I walking into. If I am going to be a leader, this is what it's going to entail, and also being explicit about the process. And so one thing we don't do, we like, hey, I remember mine, I was a bellman, and hey, Rodney, you'd be good for the bell captain. So next week I'm the bell captain. What does the bell captain do? Hey, we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
When you're doing it wrong. And sometimes when we promote people, they're figuring things out because we weren't explicit at the front end. They're finding out on the back end when they're making mistakes. And so if we're going to have leaders, are we explicit about what they're going to do and the support that's going to allow it to be successful?
Yeah, I think we have to spend, I think we have to spend time, and with my clients, I do this all the time, where they brought somebody new in and they don't teach them the process and then just expect them to do the job. And we do the same with leaders. We just expect them to do the job. Whaley, go ahead.
Yeah, really quickly, I agree with what everybody was saying, going back to your question on the challenge. Mm-hmm. The reality is, when you look at over the last 2 decades, the amount companies are spending in training and development is incredibly less than before. Yep. Right? Your Crotonvilles and all those things that used to be about training leaders and supporting, they're almost all gone because they're looking at how quickly can I get you productive, knowing that you're going to be here 3 to 5 years, accepting the turnover and then moving on. And that's the reality we have to accept, because I agree with what Jeff's saying. How do we then start to drive the greater connection between investment and performance, productivity, profitability? And I think that's where I'm spending a lot of conversation, because when you tap into that, you really get so much more alignment in the investment and the impact of the things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I'm going to shift gears. We're starting to run a little low on time here. I'm going to keep watching. So, Carlos, I am paying attention to the time. So I want to go to this final question, because I think it's an important question. We live in this very unique world of 4 generations, and Whaley, you brought up earlier, in the workforce. We have the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, the millennials, and the Gen Zers. And it is an incredible communication gap between how they communicate. Baby boomers didn't grow up with computers. Gen Xers kinda, millennials for sure, and Gen Zers, all they know is phones and to text, and don't bother with all their stuff. It's crazy. So how do we deal with that in the world of leadership? How do we deal with 4 generations? I would love to hear some of your thoughts. Tom, let's start with you.
Well, I think the important thing to remember is those timeless principles, like I talked about, right? Mm-hmm. So those pass over generations, right? Or bring generations together. Remember, those old ancient books, we were supposed to pass our lessons learned from one generation to another. Well, we're not doing so good at that since our leadership countrywide kind of is in bad shape, right? The figures depend on which survey. 70-80% think we're going in the wrong direction, right? So 70-80% are disengaged and dysfunctional and disappointed in their work. So the statistics show that we're not doing real well, and that comes down to leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership, like you said. But those timeless principles, that's what's going to bring those different generations together. If we could focus on that, I think it's probably an important point.
Thanks. Jeff?
Well, I'm going to disagree with the doctor here, and I'm going to say that we are doing great. You know, I mean, our society, corporates, yes, there's a lot of problems. But when people look at the problems, they're looking at the problems they have today. And they're not looking at the problems we had back 20, 30 years ago when you two couldn't be on this panel 30 years ago. You know, and you know, we are a better society. Yes, we have fragmented things. We have, with the internet has given voice to a few people who can get up and make it and argue and make things and distract from society. But we are in whole doing a great job. We have so many tools to us today. We have you know, people like John Maxwell and all these people who and the lessons of Dale Carnegie and Zig Ziglar, who have echoed through time and history, teaching us these lessons. And we have tons of information now. And we have all this ability, and we have faster ways to learn it. You know, YouTube is a blessing and a curse. It gives us more information, but we have that information. But it's our job to utilize that information to become better leaders and to inspire others to become better leaders. We have more people are starting businesses, starting their own businesses in this system here by leaps and bounds. It used to be you worked for a big company and that's what you worked for 20 years. But the pandemic was horrible, but it also turned us all into entrepreneurs.
Right.
And it created entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurial spirit has blossomed humongously. And we are all becoming better off of it. We're all creating, and that's what I think the future of society is. Not big corporations, but tiny people like the people we have on the panel who inspire and educate you to become better you. So that's what I see. So I think we are a great future. And I think leadership is great, and you need to embrace it and share it.
Wonderful. You know, it's interesting, and I know we've got to watch our time here, but more businesses have been created in the last 2 years than in any time in the history of the world.
Absolutely. More
When you
billionaires
talk about your entrepreneurs.
There's more
yeah.
billionaires than there ever been in the history.
Ronnie, what's your thoughts?
Well,
You have 4 generations. How do
Four
we-
generations. 4 generations. One thing that we do a poor job of is honoring each generation. When we talk about generations, we usually look at each generation from a deficiency. You lack this. You lack this. My generation did this. How do we come together and honor every generation has strength. And so when we're doing restorative practices, we have a gentleman called Peter Block. If people are familiar with them, he talks about building community, and he talks about the 6 conversations. One of the conversations I love to do is gifts. And what gifts does each generation bring to the table? And how do we put the generations together so they're talking about more about their gifts?
I love that.
And so we talk about a lot about honoring generations, and we have to be restorative with each generation. And here's the thing we have to know. Every generation talks about the next generation because something changes. Mm-hmm. And so to all of you out here, I want you to think about what were things that your grandparents were saying to you as a teenager with your teenage norms and things you did as a teenager. And now we grow up, we become grandparents, and we just repeat the process.
You're doing the progressive commercial when you become your parents, right?
Yes, become your parents, exactly. So that's the one thing I would say, you know, how do we honor each generation and let them know that we all bring something to the table?
I love that. Thank you. Really?
Yeah, I'll give a quick question because I see we have some questions. I think just picking up on what you said, we develop Culture Playbook because we believe that regardless of what generation you work in, the human behavior of wanting to be part of something bigger than yourself is great and consistent. It's the communities you're talking about. And companies miss the power of that. So we help them rebuild their strategy in a way that resonates with employees. We call that the playbook. So one is clarity around the outcome and really galvanizing a workforce against that. In order to do that, the second piece is authenticity. It's helping leaders rub the veneer off of what they think a leader should be doing and unleashing their ability to speak to the purpose of their organization with authenticity. Why do they believe in it based on their experience and their insight? And I think that's a great path forward that we're seeing great success about.
That's great. Thanks. Appreciate that. Yeah, and for me, really, I think the 4 generations, it's really communication and respecting what everybody says in a room and giving them that environment, that culture that allows them to feel free and comfortable to say something and to respect what each other say. I think that's the thing that we've worked through the most. It's about respect, really.
Yeah,
kind of writing what you were talking about, what you
Yeah.
were just talking about. So I think that's good. So yeah, we're going to move on to questions. Thank you guys for all that. Appreciate that. I see we have a question.
Yeah, I want to get back to the sustainability and leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes in this fast-changing world, as a leader, we have blind spots. And we fill those blind spots blindly. And my big beef in corporations these days is HR. Change and sustainability come from the top. But leaders are so busy doing the things they're supposed to be doing that they advocated the culture to HR. And I think that's when companies fall apart. HR, that's not their function. Sure. The function is the leadership and the sustainability from the top down. And so I wanted you to speak a little bit about how HR goes wrong and why it happened, and the function of HR within a leader-driven organization.
So I'll start off with that. So I'll tell you, it's not called HR anymore. Very few human resources organizations call themselves HR. Human capital. So it's a dynamic of a definition. It's not human resources. It's human capital or people resources. It's putting the power back in your employees and having a partnership. The human capital representative, the people resources person, really communicates and gives back the power to the people. And I think that is, and I'll keep it short because I know we have, that's the changing of how it is.
Well, let me just add, I was a CHRO, I moved over to run P&L. I can tell you the moment that I owned a P&L, I saw the world differently than I did as an HR leader. HR needs to spend time in the business. That's a must. HR right now is highly reactive, solving problems, driving compliance. They're not adding value. The example of the CFO in the way that they see their CHRO is the practical reality. So I agree with what Jeff's saying. The evolution to get there right now is long in the work that I'm doing with human resources. So we're doing a lot of work with human resources to get there. If anybody's in the room doing human resources, I ask you the last time you actually had a one-on-one with your CFO. You need to start there. Because the CFO and the CHRO is the heartbeat to solve the issue of improving productivity in a way that inspires people. That is how you improve profitability of an organization, and that's a short answer of that needs to happen, and both those functions really see that evolution.
Great, thanks, I appreciate that. We have another question.
Good morning. My name is Karen Clark Marlowe. My business is Options Employment Consulting. I specialize in workplace effectiveness, employment legislation, and people management services. I am a sole proprietor, and I often get called in to clean up messes, and often the mess is related to a toxic work environment, and I am wondering if any of you have had to go in and work within a toxic environment and how you handled it.
I mean, KinderCare is probably the perfect example, and I'm in there all the time now. To case, I had somebody come in my office after my 90 days and said, I just want you to know there's a wager. There's an under and over against you being successful here. And I said, oh, what's the bet? 1 year. So people had the audacity to come in my office and say, we think the under over on you is a year. And all that told me was whatever I wanted to do really wasn't going to be successful, or the buy would be tough. The key is, how do you gain momentum and credibility as quickly as possible? Mm-hmm. In any toxic environment, it's not about bringing best practices, it's about listening, looking for an opportunity to simply build credibility, to get people to say, you know what, I'm going to give this person a shot. So that's my short answer. I'm sure there's other perspectives.
I'm sure there's also the ability to say, to take and create other things. Like we say, get out there and volunteer with your employees and get out and help other people. That is the one thing that you can. Instead of being a human resources, be partners with them. Work with your employees and work with other departments. Do drills for disaster preparedness. Go out and volunteer as a company structure together. To break away from that, I'm the human resources and you're my employee, and create some synergy. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's all about getting everyone to start working together. If it's toxic, that means no one's working together.
Absolutely.
Right? And so we got to focus on that. I mean, I've gone into businesses like that and pulled together. You start at the top, you pull them together, you get them working together, and then they actually, in turn, go to the groups underneath them and get them all working together. And it's building a trust factor as well. And that's going to take time. It's just not something that happens overnight.
And it all starts with vision.
Yeah.
An example, in the Air Force, we had a pretty toxic situation. Anybody heard about the anthrax vaccine?
Yeah.
So the military decided that they were going to force people to take this vaccine. And so one of my young lieutenants came to me and said, did you hear about this, what they're going to do? And it caught us off guard, out of the blind. I mean, we're flying airplanes here, Mm-hmm. And so we did the research and found out, well, they had already killed 6 people from the shot. Normally that'd be taken off the market, right? And they wounded hundreds. And then that didn't include all the Gulf War illnesses. So anthrax was given in the Gulf War, and they burned the shot records, so it's hard to go and prove, but we have found plenty that show that it was given. And so they've killed hundreds and thousands. So it was a toxic situation, and it was toxic because it involved the government and DOD corrupting, right? And so you can still lead, even if you're from behind. You can still serve, right? You can lead. And so I ended up becoming a whistleblower, testifying to Congress twice to get this thing done, and it's hard to get media support. It's hard to get support from DOD. Because I was Air National Guard, so as a part-time soldier, I could wear a coat and tie and go testify to Congress. Active duty guys can't do that, and I got the generals behind me while I'm testifying. That's intimidating, right? So you can still lead, like calling the spade a spade, telling the truth. And it's not, like rose-colored glasses. It's not all cheery, and we're not doing good, but as a matter of fact. And the people down below, the 78% say we're not doing good and we're not going in the same direction. They know. So
thanks, Tom. I'm going to cut you a little bit. I apologize, but Rodney got a word in, and we're running out of time. So, but thank you for that.
Yes. Going into different school systems across the country, I've gone into lots of toxic environments. I'll give you 2 things real quick. One, start small. I've gone into schools and have changed environments just by getting the staff to start saying good morning to each other. Sometimes those small starts can make a big difference. Another thing you can do, you can have small focus groups. Here's the question that I would like you to ask them. Our environment would get better if you want to give voice because you want to know exactly what the problems are. So sometimes asking, our environment would get better if we will give you some of the answers that you need to go deeper.
Cool. Carlos, do we have time for? I'm so sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.